You're listening to the Intercoastal Podcast, part of the Destination Marketing Podcast Network. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Intercoastal Podcast. I'm Daquan Mickens, and joining us for today's episode, we have a special guest, Chef Frank Chiasera, the owner of Chef Frank's Bistro in Port Royal. Welcome to the show, Chef.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
We're glad to talk about food and kind of talk about you and your background. It's been, one of my biggest things to want to get a chef on the podcast because, with Beaufort being such a foodie town and people know Beaufort for coming and enjoying the restaurants and the food that is here. So to get you to tell your story and how you ended up in Beaufort is kind of one of our main things we wanted to do. So if you could you tell us your Beaufort story?
Yeah. So a little history on me. Grew up in Niagara Falls, New York. My very first job, I was 16 years old, walked down to the corner Italian restaurant, applied there as a dishwasher, and from there I worked there a couple of years, but worked my way up to a cook and bounced around a couple of different kitchens. And then I did try, college. I tried, didn't last very long and drafting, tried a couple of different jobs in different areas outside of food and beverage and kind of just always ended up back in a kitchen. And at that point I realized that, I should give this a shot. Back then, a few years ago, it wasn't as popular as it was, as it is now on TV and everything. Yeah. But so, let me give it a shot. So I ended up going to college. Went to community college first and then graduated from there. I still wanted to take another step forward. So ended up applying at the Culinary Institute of America in Hyde Park, New York, which ended up being a blessing because I didn't realize that it was, one of the best schools in the, world. So I lucked out there, had a great experience upon graduating from Culinary Institute of America, went back to Niagara Falls for a year, worked in a really, really nice restaurant in Buffalo, gained a lot of great experience, but knew I wanted to expand, what I was doing. So ended up, moving down south, spent a little time in Mississippi. And then from there went to Charleston, worked my way up to a sous chef in a private member club. And then ended up working my way up to executive chef there, which ended up, being with Club Corp. So I was with them for about 15 years, going to Orlando, and then from Orlando to Hilton Head, from Hilton Head to Charlotte, and then Charlotte to Richmond Hill. And about 25 years total as a executive chef in private member clubs, which there's a lot of stories in that. But it was a great experience. I loved it. Loved everything about being executive chef in a private club and, all the challenges that you faced every day. But it was challenging.
Yeah. And I like to hear the story of you traveling all over the Southeast and being from the Northeast. So you have that vast majority of experience to bring into your own restaurant. It's not like you just graduated and were like, well, this is what I want to do. Let me start my own restaurant. You can take from different experiences from different cultures and different cities, and you bring that here to the Beaufort area. So I wanted to ask you, what made you decide, Port Royal, Beaufort is where I want to start my restaurant?
So it's funny because I lived in Charleston for a while. I lived in Hilton Head, which I actually reside there right now. And I used to drive past Beaufort and Port Royal all the time. And what's funny is I was looking for a restaurant in Hilton Head and realized after a while looking at all the different restaurants that, they're very seasonal. It's a great area. I mean, It's a great area, but very seasonal when it comes to the restaurant scene and very competitive.
Yeah.
So a friend of mine said, hey, I know a small little restaurant in Port Royal. So I took a look at it, fell in love with it, right away. As soon as I walked in, I knew it. And then, me and my wife kind of walked around the area of Port Royal, down Revolt Road and down Paris Ave, and just automatically just fell in love with the whole area. Bird Sanctuary right across the street from us. It's just beautiful. So, sometimes you're better off being a little lucky than good. And I think that's exactly what happened to us. And, when you look at the restaurant now that I'm in, it's basically a combination of all the history that I have, the past history of 25 years with, my white tablecloth service, the personalized service and everything.
Yeah. And if you could you speak on some of that personalized service for people who are looking to come to your restaurant? Like, what do you offer them that's kind of different than most restaurants?
So I try to bring that club experience.
Mm-hmm.
So, like I said, the 25 years of experience, I took that and kind of just built it into it. We only have 9 tables.
Mm-hmm.
We're open 5 days a week, but what I did was we take the personalized service where when people make the reservations, I actually take a good portion of the reservations, or my executive sous chef, Nicole, she takes a lot of the reservations, and people will tell us they have a birthday or a special occasion or an anniversary, or, they're gluten-free, or, they want a cake or anything, really, basically. And if we're able to do it, we always try to accommodate. We try to bring that personalized service. My service staff is fantastic. They know a lot because it is a small town. So we get a lot of repeat customers, and they love, the restaurant. And when they come in, a lot of times, I'd say more than half the time, our service staff will recognize them or know them. They know what kind of food they like. They know, their names of their kids. It's nice. So, and then I also make it a point. I try to come out when I can and talk to everybody and see how their meal was, and, introduce myself.
Yeah, that's really cool that like you do not get that experience at, most restaurants, that the chef will come out and talk to you and greet you and say, hey, how was it? Did you enjoy your time here with us? Versus somewhere like Hilton Head or like Charleston, where it's a larger space. So it's hard to, get in touch to people and really know who's coming into your restaurants.
Yeah, it's funny because we'll recognize the names too. Like, there's certain names I'll see that, on the reservation sheet, and I'll make it a point. I need to go say hi to them. I didn't make it out to them last time. So, but you're right. And having only 9 tables, it makes it easy to do the personalized service, to do the personalized. We had a table come in the other night that, they were astounded that we have gluten-free rolls, but, and we get, a certain amount of people that come in that are gluten-free. So we try to accommodate all that.
Yeah. And I'm sure the people who come in really appreciate that and appreciate you guys for what you do. If you could you let our listeners know like your philosophy in the kitchen, kind of like how the dynamics work in the kitchen and how that is?
Well, my philosophy's changed a lot over the years. Way back in the day, it was a lot different than it is now. I mean, obviously, as you gain experience, what I realized the most though over those years is that, relationships are very important. So our kitchen we try to keep it professional. It's just right now, it's just me and Nicole. And then we just are expanding our kitchen staff to bring in another cook, which is great. But yeah, I mean, we're very professional. We try to do consistency. Consistency is probably the most important thing in a restaurant. And I think with me and Nicole doing every plate, you'll see that you'll get that consistency, I go out and talk to tables. They're always like, oh my God, that was the best swordfish I've ever had in my life. Well, I cook it the same way every single time. So, they don't have a different cook, doing it every week. So I think consistency is very important. And, we focus on that a lot, and obviously good quality ingredients. We try to source as much local stuff as possible too.
Okay. Yeah. And that definitely, like you said, helps. Having the same hands touch the same food builds that consistency. So you know what you're getting every time you show up. You're like, okay, I know what I'm expecting, how it's going to taste, how it's going to, be for me and my family when we go. So I'm like, again, I'm sure the return customers really appreciate that as well. So what has owning a restaurant been like compared to working in a private like club? Feel free to take your time on that question. I know it's a loaded question.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's funny because like I said, 25 years in private member clubs, I loved it. I loved every minute of being a chef, executive chef, and, having large staffs and, multiple restaurants, and just loved everything about it. This is completely different. I mean, only because it's downsized to, from a staff of 25 to a staff of me and one other, or me and 2 other. And then our, wait staff, we have maybe four servers. So it's completely different in that aspect. plus, I get to cook again. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it's probably been about 20 years since I've spent every day cooking.
Mm-hmm.
I was in an executive role for so long that you kind of lose that. And,
Mm-hmm.
it's funny, but like sometimes as an executive chef there, peeling a bag of onions made me happy.
Yeah.
Now it's like making, a pot of soup every day makes me very happy. So
Yeah.
it brings back that love, that joy of cooking again,
Mm-hmm.
which, I mean, like I said, I love being an executive chef, but now being a cook,
Yeah.
/ owner is awesome.
Yeah. And as the executive chef, would you look over like meals that went out to the tables or anything? Or were you just like, this is the menu, this is what we have, and it's up to you guys to do the menu?
Yeah, in private, as an executive chef, yes, that your big thing is you either, pick to be more of an office chef or
Mm-hmm.
more of a hands-on chef. I tried to be more of a hands-on chef where I expedited and,
Mm-hmm.
checked the plates and, did all that, was involved with my staff and
Yeah.
show them and train them and teach them how to set up a line properly. And,
Mm-hmm.
which is extremely important, I think, for executive chefs.
Yeah.
That's one of the most important things. You always want to build your staff.
Mm-hmm.
If you can surround yourself with good people and train them well, and they'll respect that. And that's good. That's 50% of your battles right there. And that's one of the biggest problems in the industry right now is the fact that can't find good people. And so you got to be able to, figure that out.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, that's a huge difference now. I mean, now me and Nicole, it's funny because I hire Nicole with me as a pantry cook in one of my clubs, and she had zero experience.
Yeah.
And my sous chef at the time was like, nope, don't hire her. I'm like, I don't know. I get a good feel when I talk to her, and when I go to hire people now, it's not about whether they can make soup or it's not about whether they can cook. Because I can teach anybody how to make soup, or I can teach them how to cook. I can teach them how to set up a station, but I can't teach them how to have a good attitude or a good work ethic.
Yeah.
And I could tell right away, just as that's one of the things that I've learned over the years is what to look for when I'm, hiring somebody. And that's one of the things. I look for that personality. I look for that work ethic. There's certain questions that I would ask that would kind of pull that out. And she had zero experience. She was a house mom for a long time, and she just wanted to get a part-time job. And I had the right feel, and my sous chef at the time was like, no, don't hire her. Don't. And I'm like, no, we're going to hire her. So we did. We brought her in, and she hit the ground running. I say it took her about a year and a half. She moved up to a cook. She learned all the stations. And then from there, I think it was after 2 years, I promoted her to sous chef. She ended up, my sous chef at the time left, and then she moved up. And it was one of the things I always try to do in all my clubs was to promote from within. Yeah. And so we were together. So when I ended up leaving my club that she was at, that was one of the stipulations. I really, really wanted to have her come with me because so she knew that. And so when I ended up leaving and doing my own restaurant, she was able to follow me.
Yeah, that's really cool that, and that comes from you traveling all over the place, touching a bunch of different people, realizing, okay, these are the people I don't want to work with. These are the type of people I do want to work with. Yeah. And this is kind of how I want to build my business model based off of all these different types of people.
Yeah. And it's funny because that was another thing I learned is it's all about relationships. It's, when you're a young chef, I was a young chef back in the day, it was like, just getting through the day of, yelling, screaming, hollering or whatever. Yeah. And as you get older, you get more experience, you start realizing it's all about relationships. And, I've been lucky throughout my career. One of the most important things for me was the fact that, I have good relationships with a lot of people that have worked for me. And, I still stay in touch with a lot of them, and they've, that's probably one of the biggest things I take a lot of pride in is the fact that they've, I've helped their careers in some way, whether it was helping them set up a station or help them with, a contact or help them with, how to approach working in a kitchen or whatever. And so, it's good to hear, some of the people that have worked for me that own their own businesses now were executive chefs in some really nice, restaurants. So, and it's not just the people that have worked for me too. It's relationships with your vendors. It's relationships with the farmers. It's relationships with my customers. It's all, to me, it's all very important. Yeah. And that's what it's all about at the end of the day. Yeah.
And what better place to do it here than in Beaufort, Port Royal, where community is everything, especially for running a restaurant to keep, most restaurants afloat. the community buys in, and not only just the community, but when visitors come in, one of the first places the community tell people are about their very favorite restaurants. They're like, hey, where should I eat? Like, oh, we love to go here, and this is where we like to do. So if they were to say your restaurant, they say, hey, you should come here when you do visit here in a month or two, place a reservation or anything like that. But I just wanted to ask you, like, what kinds of cuisines do you offer and do you serve at Chef Frank's Bistro?
So I think with the experience that I've had working in, where I used to do breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and, different features every week and change the menu often, I have a pretty decent background of different food. And I always try to figure out, how could I sum up my cuisine in one or two words? And I'm like, well, I don't think I can. It's too diverse. I believe it. It's very diverse. But I've always kind of went with, let me try this. And if it sells well, I'll put it on the menu. And that has always worked for me in private clubs. And it seems to work well with the restaurant. So the very first week I was there, still kind of learning what I was doing, didn't know what I was doing, didn't know what kind of menu I wanted to run. But then I ran a swordfish catch, a feature, which was just going to run for the week. And it sold like crazy. And every time I went out to say something to someone, they were like, that was the best swordfish I've ever had. So it ended up going on the menu. So, and that's kind of how we develop, we'll try something new. And if people like it and we get really good feedback, then we'll put it on the menu for a little bit. And we do change our menu, seasonally, and we try to change it, if we feel like something's been on there too long. Yeah, that's basically probably the nuts and bolts of how we do it.
Okay. And would you feel like that's like one of the most, if I had to ask you what the most difficult part about, being an owner / chef in a restaurant, would you say the menu, or would you say, what would you say is the most difficult?
Believe it or not, the easiest part of my day is when I actually get into the kitchen and I start prepping and cooking and through service. So we're very detail oriented, you know what I mean? Like setting our stations up the same way every time and to have everything ready by service time at 5:00. And whether it's your garnishes or whatever it is, everything's got to be done and ready to go. So for me, the prepping part of it and the service part is probably the most fun.
Okay.
And then going out to the tables, believe it or not, because you get that instant gratification. I kind of love that too. The most challenging, obviously, I would say is, the other side, the office side of it.
The business side.
That's the boring part where you got to get up at 7 a.m, sit in front of a computer and pay bills and
logistics.
And so I would say that would probably be
Okay. So if you could just show up, cook, and go home, that would be the dream.
Correct.
Okay. I was just trying to wrap my head around, because it's practically two jobs in one. You're doing multiple jobs. As one person, you're doing someone else's job along with your own job. So.
Correct. Actually, I'm going to add to that. I'm going to actually say that cutting the grass on the side of the building is actually the worst job for me. That's even worse than the office work. So that's the other thing people don't realize. Owning your own business, you're the grass cutter. You take out the garbage. You pretty much do it all. So I would say cutting the grass.
Yeah, first one in, last one to leave. It's always going to be you. But it's your baby. You have that passion to make sure you see what you put all your heart and effort into thrive. So that's kind of why we want you guys on here on the podcast, so that we can share your grace. So that way, when people do hear this podcast, they can show up and be like, I saw that you cut the grass, so I appreciate it.
Well, now they're going to know who it is out there in the t-shirt cutting the grass.
Yeah, they'll enjoy the food when you come to their table, and then they'll say, I appreciate the food. It was amazing. Also, you did a great job cutting the grass.
Or washing the outside of the windows.
Yeah. So they can start nitpicking everything else. Be like, oh, you missed a spot here. But the food was great still. So that's the benefit of the podcast. They get to know you, know your background, know who you are. So then it builds that personality of, it's not just, oh, this person who runs the restaurant and when we never see them. So you coming out to the tables definitely helps personalize it to where people are like, you know what, I want to go somewhere where I can actually meet the chef or have the chance to meet the chef after I eat my dinner.
Yeah, and I think I was lucky enough to work in private clubs where I did that, so I had a little history on it. So it
Hmm.
just felt so natural to do it here
Yeah.
because it's just a continuation of that private experience,
Yeah,
private club experience.
I agree. If you had to recommend one dish from your menu or that you would love, like for people to come to Chef Frank's Bistro, what would be the first one you would say?
Well, that's a tough question because obviously we're proud of every
Hmm.
every item on there, and then but you have the items that like don't sell that you think are great and you
Hmm.
wish would sell more. Like we had
Yeah.
stracciatella and portobello,
Yep.
which I thought was fantastic. And the people that did order was like, "Oh my god, this is great! Stracciatella is so fresh and good, and especially in the summer months."
Hmm.
And then there's the items that sell like crazy, like our swordfish sells like
Yeah.
crazy. It's a pesto crusted swordfish with a
Hmm.
vegetable risotto and a little white butter sauce with it. It's one of our number one sellers.
Yeah.
Our fresh catch, which we change up weekly,
Hmm.
is up there too. That sells like crazy. We do an Italian budino for a dessert, which I always try to recommend that when people ask me. We make, of course, all our desserts fresh in house.
Hmm.
But I mean, like I said, we change it up. We change our menu up. But we have a great chicken dish which
Yeah.
has a mushroom marsala on it. So I would say there's, I recommend everything. My first question is, are you in the mood? Actually, the sugo.
Hmm.
We have a sausage, pappardelle pasta
Hmm.
with a sausage tomato sauce, bolognese style,
Yeah.
and that's a great seller too.
Oh wow. Yeah. I knew it'd be a complicated answer because it's like asking a mom to pick which kid is her favorite. You're never gonna get an answer, but you're gonna give all the same love to every dish and everything that you do have. So thank you for giving that many menu options for people, especially now they can hear this. And even if they come at a later date, they know, let me like what's the chef special or what would the chef recommend when they do come?
Mhm.
So they can have like even when the menu does change over time, it could be a year, 2 years from now, but they can still come up and show love and be like, "Hey, I heard it on the podcast that I should have this." So that way people know. How's the Port Royal community responded and interacted with you in your restaurant?
So it's been great since day one. From day one, when we got in here, I've noticed, the area has been fantastic. It's been very supportive. Word of mouth has been great. As I mentioned earlier, we get a lot of repeat business,
Hmm.
but we also get a lot of times I go out there. I'm like, oh, how'd you hear about us? Oh, my friend so and so was in here last week, and they said, oh, you got to come try this. This is the best. And so and we get support from all the local areas. It's
Hmm.
not just Port Royal, but we Beaufort and Cat Island, Kalawasi. I mean, all the different areas
Hmm.
have what I mean. Dawtaw has been
Yeah.
fantastic. So the whole area has been very supportive and great. And like I was saying, the word of mouth just has been great. So like I said, it was just a perfect fit for me.
Yeah, that's good. And if you could, I know the story from us talking off mic, but could you tell the listeners how you decided on your name of Chef Frank's Bistro?
So yeah, that's a funny one. So when I took over the restaurant, I had about half people telling me, "Oh, you should keep it the old name,"
Yeah.
and then the other half of people I knew were saying, "No, you need to change it." So it
Hmm.
was really difficult, thinking about it, and it took me a couple of weeks to try to figure out: do I keep it, because people know the name, or do I change it? Make it my own. And then I had, a local business owner tell me, say, you need to personalize it and you should name it after yourself. And I was like, well, that's not me. That's not my style.
Yeah.
And so I thought about it and I said, you know what? We're going to do this. We're going to name it Chef Frank's Bistro.
Yeah.
And I think it was a good decision.
Hmm.
So now it's, something different. It's us, it's me.
Hmm.
And yeah, it was a tough decision, but I'm glad we went with it.
Yeah, and it makes you stand out. There's not many restaurants named after the chef in the Low Country or anywhere near here. So
Yeah, puts a little more pressure on me since it's my name on there now. So
yeah, your personal touch. No one can take that from you. And then, do you have any future plans for Chef Frank's Bistro?
well. Yeah, I mean, right now what we want to do is we're just focusing on dinner. There's no plans for breakfast or lunch. So it's going to be dinner
Hmm.
Tuesday through Saturday, 5 to 9. And we want to keep developing our menu and keep developing it towards, local as much as possible. And then we also want to keep it, best quality, best, fresh ingredients. And then just keep developing what the people in the area want.
Yeah.
I think that's very important to, as it sells and people like it and they respond to that item, to get it on the menu and run that in a rotation.
Yeah.
And then our service, keep, developing our service to, keep it as a corner restaurant that, everybody knows, you feel welcome. You come in, the server name, me, Nicole. So I think just keep developing those relationships with everybody in the area. When they come in, it's kind of like their own little restaurant.
Yeah, I agree. It makes it feel homey when you walk in. You're like, oh, this is my usual spot. This is my usual table. This is my usual drink. And they already know what I want. It definitely helps build that camaraderie of, I'm going to come back here. I'm going to keep coming back here, and I'm going to keep supporting the restaurant. And then the restaurant wants to support you and give you everything that you want when you order. Yeah.
And I think that's very important. It's important for people to feel comfortable when they walk in and, when they leave, to know that, it feels like their restaurant.
Yeah, I agree. This has been a great episode, Chef. We really appreciate you, and thank you for coming on to the show to talk about Chef Frank's Bistro. Before you go, can you tell us where we can find you? The listeners can find your website or the phone number to call if they were looking to make reservations, or how far out do they need to make reservations?
So we are located on 1635 Paris Avenue in Port Royal. We are open Tuesday through Saturday, 5 to 9 for dinner. Reservations, you can call 843-379-3664. And you can either leave a message, or either myself or Nicole or one of our servers will pick up. We recommend reservations only because we have 9 tables. We want to make sure that you don't have to wait and that you can get a table as soon as you come in. But we also welcome walk-ins. If we have tables available, of course, we're going to, take a walk-in. So.
Okay. Thank you so much for joining us again. This has been a great episode. Thank you for listening to the Intercoastal Podcast. You can follow us on social media at visit_BeaufortSC on Instagram, or at BeaufortSC on Facebook. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a review. We'll talk to y'all next time. This has been another episode of the Intercoastal Podcast, hosted by Daquan Mickens and the team at Visit Beaufort, Port Royal, and the Sea Islands. Produced by Relic.